Good morning, Rabotai. Welcome back to Breakfast in the Class. Breakfast in the Class today is sponsored by Gail and Sunny Haddad, dedicated in memory of Cynthia Haraylu Nishmat Simcha Bat Saha. Learning for this week is also dedicated by our Torah Center namesake donors, Margaret and Daniel S. Loeb. Hazaku Baruch of the Daniel S. Loeb Torah Center. Hazaku Baruch also dedicated for Fuash Lema, for Eliyahu Shimon and Mazal Fortuné, and for the continued health of Chana Bat Sima Fega. Also dedicated this entire year in loving memory and Leilu Nishmat Ruth or Fali Bat Adela, Eliyahu Shalom, sponsored by her family, and also by Gail and Sunny Haddad, dedicated in loving memory of Eddie S. Haddad, Leilu Nishmat Ezra Ben Nehama. Are you ready? Let's begin. The Pasuk tells us, the Tefillah tells us, that the Jewish people under the rule of the Greeks, in the days of Matitya, the Kohen Gadol, Hashmonai Banav, when the wicked Greek Empire stood against them, right? To make them forget your Torah, Ulahaviram michukei ritzonecha, and to dissuade them, lahaviram, to turn them away, michukei ritzonecha, from, what does a chok mean? Anyone know? Chok is a mitzvah that we don't know the reason for, okay? Lahaviram michukei ritzonecha, from the mitzvot that we don't know the reason for, ritzonecha, that you want us to do. So I saw a beautiful observation from Rabbi Baruch Mordechai Ezrachi. Fire, by the way. Fire rabbi, right there. Please only answer amen if you're listening to this live. Baruch atah Adonai. Eloheinu melech haolam, she'akol nהיה baro. So he was a rabbi from Eretz Yisrael Lev Shalom. His musar was the most beautiful, powerful musar, penetrating. The name of his book is Birkat Mordechai. It was one of my favorite books, one of my favorite svarim. And if you ever heard him speak live, he was a magnificent, eloquent speaker. He was a gifted speaker. He was not only erudite, but also had the tremendous gift of being an excellent communicator. But when he would speak, you could actually hear him thundering, like his ideas, and he had a way of speaking. And when they wrote his sefer, they wrote it literally in his voice. So if you ever went to classes by him, to his Musar classes, it's like he's standing there in the room with you. It's a remarkable experience how they wrote his books. Anyway, I could almost imagine him saying this in his inimitable, powerful voice. He says, what does it mean when it says Laha'aviram michukei ritzonecha? To pull them away from the chukei ritzonecha, from the chukim of your will. He says it should have just said Laha'aviram michukecha. By definition, a chok is something that is God's will. Not only that, the question also arises, what is it that was the Greeks' intention? Was their intention only to abolish chukim? They wanted to abolish all Torah practice. We know that they asked for Shabbat, for Milah, Rosh Chodesh, Talmud Torah. We know that they wanted all of that to stop. Are all of those chukim? Right? So the question is, why is it saying L'haviram michukei ritzonecha? And he says something that I believe is just very, very profound. And he says this as an insight into how we look at the mitzvot that we do. When a person looks at the mitzvot, we believe the mitzvot are categorized as mitzvot that we do for no reason versus mitzvot that we do for a reason. A mitzvah that you do for a reason is a mishpat. That's how we understand. We know the reason. We're doing the mitzvah for a reason. A mitzvah that's a chok is a mitzvah that has no reason. Now that's only partially true. And let me explain what Rav Baruch Mordechai is expressing here. When a person does a mitzvah, there's really only one reason you ever do a mitzvah. And that is because we were commanded to do so by God. Asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu. He sanctified us with his mitzvot and he commanded us to do so. So when a person shakes lulav, what should they have in mind? God commanded me to take these, that's why we say, the Shem Yichud. I'm coming to fulfill the mitzvah of my Creator to do this. The intention that a person has is God commanded me to do this. So why, if the Torah wanted you to do mitzvot only because God said so, why did it differentiate between some mitzvot where it told you the reason and some mitzvot where it didn't? If anyway, the reason why you do a mitzvah is not because of that reason. So let's visit some famous ones, okay? We know that the reason why we eat matzah on Pesach is because the Jewish people did not have time for their dough to rise, and therefore, when they left with the dough on their back, Mish'arotam tzerurot besimlotam al shichmam ubnei Yisrael asu kidbar Moshe min wenjayet. Yeah, this is what we say on the night of the Seder. They were carrying it on their backs. The dough didn't have time to rise, so that's the reason why we eat matzah. Incorrect.
15 days earlier.
Incorrect. What? Incorrect. The reason why we eat matzah is because Hashem said so. So why you give me a reason? Why do we sit in Sukkot? Says the Torah. It's not your reason or my reason. The Torah says what Dan said, what Nathan said, right? The Torah says what you said. So, what does the Torah mean? You have to sit in a sukkah. Why do you sit in a sukkah? Ki besukot oshavti et bnei Israel. I sat the Jews in Sukkot when I took them out of Israel. Machloket in the Gemara, which kind of Sukkot? Alanei kavod, real Sukkot. But the Torah tells you, you sit in a sukkah. Why? Because I put you in Sukkot when you left Egypt. Therefore, when I do the mitzvah of sukkah, why am I doing it? Because we sat in Sukkot. Incorrect. I'm sitting in sukkah, you know why? Because God said so. Hashem commanded me to do something. That's why I'm doing it. So what is the pasuk attempting to do by telling you, Ki besukot oshavti? What is the pasuk trying to do when it tells you that you have to, what's it called? That you have to eat matzah because of the fact that they ate matzah on the way out of Egypt. Ki bechipazon. What does the Torah mean? What does the Torah mean that when it tells you that you have to do something for your servant in a specific case? Why? Right? You can't do this because of what you've done to her. By a ama ivriya. What does the Torah mean when it says that you can't treat a convert disrespectfully because you were once a convert? Torah gives you the reason, but that's not the reason. The reason is Hashem said so. So why is the Torah wasting its breath? And the answer is something magnificent. He says it one way. I'm going to try and dial it maybe a half a degree further. Let me explain. Rav Baruch Mordechai explains that the Torah is really made up of two parts. One part is the asiyah, the doing, and one part is the limud, the learning. There are mitzvot that we learn about and we get rewarded for, even though we have never done the mitzvah, we will never do the mitzvah. What's an example of that? Excellent. Ben Sorer Moreh, the wayward son. Machloket in the Gemara, if it happened once or if it happened nonce. 0 times. So why do we have in the Torah? Derosh v'kabel sechar. Learn it and receive the reward. So one part of Torah is the mitzvah, the active part, the doing. Then there's another part of Torah which is called the limud Torah. The reasons for the mitzvah exist, he explains, in the world of Torah study, in the world of limud Torah, in the world of understanding, but in the world of doing. Why do I do something? Hashem said so. I have to spend every effort that I have, that I can, every brain cell that I've got, to understand the Torah on the deepest possible level. But why am I doing it? That action has nothing to do with reason. Fascinating. Let me take it one step further. Now, he does not say this. This is something that I'm saying. And maybe it's kind of what he means. The reason why I sit in a sukkah is because Hashem told me to. Every mitzvah I do because Hashem told me to. That must be the be all and end all of why we do mitzvot. But my friends, what is the mitzvah? I'd like to argue that the mitzvot where the Torah told you a reasoning, a logic, an understanding, a feeling, what the Torah was actually doing was telling you that part of the mitzvah that God asked you to do was to do this mitzvah while thinking this thought. The Bach writes that if a person sits in a sukkah and does not think of the fact that the Jewish people were sat in Sukkot on the way out of Egypt, he's not fulfilled the mitzvah of Sukkah. If you ate matzah, it would follow the same concept. Says the Bach, but what do you mean? Don't we hold mitzvot and no tzrichot kavana that you don't have to fulfill in order? It's not, the mitzvah is not undone if you don't have it. He says that's true about a mitzvah where the Torah itself doesn't give you the kavana. But when the Torah tells you, think this. Let me give you an example. Let's say I'm trying to prepare you for meditation. And I want you to be able to focus on something. In order to do so, what do? I tell you, I want you to sit with your legs crossed like this. I want you to hold your hands out. Now there's a reason why in yoga and meditative poses are constructed the way that they are. Part of it is to remove the option of movement from your body. That's one of the reasons. There's different reasons why people, why these poses are the way they are. Set a specific feeling of receptiveness by the positioning of the body. Blood flow is being added as well to this. Centering is being added as well to this. So when your legs are crossed in that way and your hands are held out, it creates an obvious center for where the person should be thinking and centering their thoughts and breathing. So that's all part of the concepts of meditation. Imagine now I tell you, listen, I want you to start breathing slowly. Breathe. 1, 2, in, breathe out. I want you to close your eyes. I want you to imagine all black. There's nothing in your imagination, just dark. All you see and feel is the breathing in and the breathing out. And I'm giving you this whole meditative, this beautiful meditation. I'm teaching you how to do it. Every action I asked you to do was an action I asked for. But then as part of the meditation, I asked you to think a thought while you were doing that action. Now you don't believe in meditation, you don't practice meditation. Why are you doing it? Because maybe you like me, maybe you think as a rabbi I have something to tell you. So what are you going to do? You're going to do and think because I said so. So I'm dialing the Birkat Mordechai's explanation a half a degree, I don't know to the right or to the left, but a half a degree further than what he says in his simplest form. Now he might mean this. So it's not just that the kavanot and the reasons of mitzvot are part of study Torah and the actions or deeds. No. The study of Torah sharpens, teaches you not why I should do it, but what I should be thinking while I'm doing it because God said so. Ultimately, the L'Shem Yichud is Hashem commanded me to. My friends, it turns out then that a person all day is truly doing God's will. Now, this sounds interesting because in my mind, I think I'm praying, I'm learning, I'm giving tzedakah, doing all these things. But really, all I'm doing is one thing. I'm doing God's will. The more things that are categorized under that one heading, the more I become a vessel for achieving Hashem's will in this world. Now, imagine, you never see these people, you only had one job. You ever see those guys? You only had one job. They used one thing you were supposed to do. Only one thing. You're wondering, how could a guy get it wrong? Right? It's even become a meme. You had one job. Yes? Are we all on the same page? You had one job. When a person wants to become amazing at their job, a lot of times what they need to do is consolidate that job, is eliminate the all and sundry of their job. And when they have one job, then their job becomes much easier to do, with a greater degree of focus, with an unbelievable sense of purpose and direction. There's never confusion as to what I'm supposed to do, because I only have one job. We have 613 mitzvot in the Torah, but we just finished Masechet Makot. And in Masechet Makot, right at the end, the Gemara comes and says, Ba Chavakuk. The Navi Chavakuk came along. Vehemidan alachat. And he stood all 613 mitzvot on one mitzvah, on one principle. Tzaddik be'emunato yichyeh. A tzaddik lives by his emunah, by his faith in God. What does he mean that all mitzvot are one thing? They're not. There's not one mitzvah called emunah. There's many mitzvot. And the answer is correct, but also incorrect. There are many mitzvot, but they are all expressions of one job. Tzaddik be'emunato yechyeh. I am a doer of God's will. Imagine that became your job title. Smiley face. Hello, my name is Shlomo. God's will doer. Now, has any of you ever thought of yourself that way? Says Rav Baruch Mordechai Ezrach, it might be what he means when he says that the logic is part of Limud Torah, but not part of the action. What I'm explaining is, no, the action is, Hashem is saying, sit here while thinking this, but do it because I said so. Why was that so important? The reason why that's so important, my friends, is because when a person does a mitzvah with all of their wisdom and all of their learning, and they think to themselves, Rabbi, I never related to the mitzvot so much. Now I learned all about Chanuka. I know why I'm lighting the candles. I know why I'm shaking. Now my mitzvot have come to life. They've not come to life. They've come to death. Because your mitzvah in your mind, it makes sense. The worst thing you could hear someone is, wow, Rabbi, after what you just said today, unbelievable. You explained this mitzvah so well. Rabbi, I never agreed with this mitzvah. Now I agree with it. I've done you a disservice. I remember a long time ago, there was a comic that translated itself into an actual product. You can actually buy this. It's a big box that says suggestion box. You put out at work or at home. And the box at the top has a place where you could put all the suggestions. And the bottom is a garbage can. Suggestion box, garbage can. You agree with the mitzvah? It makes sense to you? You're doing this because you think it makes sense? Listen, honey, you're not doing a mitzvah anymore. Did you catch that? I give tzedakah. You know why? There's nothing that feels as good as giving. So you're giving tzedakah because it makes you feel good? So there's a lot of things you do. You eat nice food, you go on nice vacations, you give money, all these things, they make me feel so good. So what did you just do? You took a mitzvah, you ripped it out of God's hands, and you made it something that makes sense to you. Now, should the mitzvah make sense to me? Yes, they should. Should I feel good when I do the mitzvah? Yes, I should. But that cannot be the reason why I'm doing it. Because if it is the reason why I'm doing it, I'm just doing something that I think makes sense. I'm doing something that I like to do. I'm doing something that makes sense to me. Says the Birkat Mordechai, let's look again at these words. When the Greeks stood against the Jews, what did they tell them? They told them, we want you to forget your Torah. Uleha'aviram michukei retzonecha. They did not mind the Jewish people staying alive. They did not even mind the Jewish people doing their mitzvot. They did not even mind the Jewish people doing chukim. There was one thing that bothered the Greeks, and that is L'ha'aviram michukei retzonecha. You're doing a chuk because he wants you to? I don't mind you doing meaningless things. I don't mind you doing something that has no reason, has no purpose, that is purely for your own enjoyment. I have no problem with that. The Greeks lived in a society that was pagan. They had all sorts of temples, all over the place, to all sorts of gods. The Greeks were the originators of Greek mythology. They had many gods. Gods of the thing, of the ocean, of the mountains, of the wind, of the sun. 1,000 gods. And the gods are fighting with each other, sleeping with each other, having children with each other. Very Lebedik. Their problem was not with any of that. Their problem was one thing. It can't be that you're doing something that you don't understand, that you don't agree with. Now listen carefully to this, because this is very important, not only to understand the story of Chanuka, but also to understand how we perform mitzvot. The Greeks believed they were the ones that began the process of the Olympics. The idea of the perfection and the development of the human body, to the point where athletes at the time would compete with no clothes on. To be able to showcase the refinement of every one of the muscles that was required in throwing a javelin, in running, in lifting weights, or whatever the case might be. The statues that we have of the Olympics, and by the way, the temple that it was performed at, right, are of naked athletes performing, throwing a discus, whatever the case might be. My friends, the Greek belief in human superiority, even over God, was not a musculature conversation. Well, unless you believe, as science tells us today, that the brain is a muscle. In that case, then it was also a muscular conversation. But even God is bound, is trapped, is defined only in the confines of the human brain and the human experience. I always love this idea that the word for Greek is Yavan. And if you look at the way it's written, you have the Yud. Yud always represents God. It starts with Yefet, who was righteous. Yaft Elohim liyefet. But then what happened? Then you have the Vav, which is taking the Yud and drawing it further down. But at least it's still in the line. It's still in some form of a boundary. And then you have the Nun, pulling it even further down towards the earth. Yavan's power, Yavan's mission was to steal the power back from God and to become the purpose, the reason, the center of the universe. That was their purpose. That was what Yavan actually was. Now listen to this. If that's the case, I don't mind if you do a mitzvah. I don't mind if you bring korbanot. I don't mind if you say Shema twice a day or 50 times a day, so long as it's your choice to do so. My body, my choice. They were the originators of that phrase. The answer to this is the inverse of Yavan. Is the subservience to God, is the doubling down on Ritzonecha. What do you want, Hashem, from me? This thing that I'm doing makes so much sense to me. God, I love doing it, but that's not why I'm doing it. I'm doing it because, Hashem, you commanded us to do so. And it feels so good to do this commandment, God, because in your wisdom, you asked me to do this for this reason. But it's because you asked me to do so. A person who lives that way, when they get to a mitzvah that they don't understand, and when they get to something that they can't necessarily relate to, doesn't suddenly have their Judaism grind to a halt. A person who has their own personal interests as to why they should not do a mitzvah. So all of a sudden, in the mind and in the heart of a person that does mitzvot that they love, suddenly there's a mitzvah that they hate. And they can't make themselves get over that hump. Because the model, the modus operandi of their mitzvah observance is I do what I want, when I want, how I want. But tzaddik be'emunato yichyeh. A tzaddik not only lives his life with his faith, tzaddik be'emunato yichyeh. He comes alive in the service of Hashem. My friends, it's not only true in mitzvot, it's also true in the way we see our lives. I read a beautiful interpretation of these words that fits so beautifully like a glove. In the name of the Sefer, I want to say it's Yad Yosef. He writes something magnificent. He says, you know, this same idea, when related to the mitzvot, is that this is why God did something, why He commanded you. But how does that translate into the occurrences or the stories in my life? When a person looks at their life and accepts from God the things that they understand from God, that means that they're in line when things are going well. But when they cannot understand God's plan, then they're angry and they're bitter and they feel distance from Hashem. But a person who lives their life that when God said so, it's good. In practice, they become a, if God said so, it's good. In living, in health, in business, that kind of a person walks around without a care in the world. Just completely stress-free. Hashem wants this. And if Hashem wants this, this is what we do. What a magnificent thing. I just heard an interview last night with a woman who suffered unimaginably the loss of a child in this terrible, terrible war. Anyway, the rabbi comes to the shiva and he says, listen, I have no idea, I can't explain to you, I can't tell you why this happened, I can't express to you anything, and I know that you would never wish this challenge on yourself or on anybody else. He said, but take this opportunity. In this broken time, Hashem is right there, the Shekhinah is right above your head. Thank you, Meaningful Minute, for sharing this with me. The Shekhinah is right above your head. God is so close to you in your suffering, in your sorrow, in your pain. Take advantage of that closeness. The idea that if things are not working out for me, I feel distance from God, is turned on its head by these words. La'aviram michukei ritzonecha. Sometimes, ritzonecha, God, your will, your desire, is a chok for me and I don't understand it. But I would not wish to be taken away from that place. And this woman said, throughout the entire painful experience, the thing that stuck with her and kept her alive and kept her fighting and kept her positive is, I don't wish this to have happened, but now that it has happened, God is right here with me. What do I want to ask Him for? How do I want to connect with Him? How do I want to get comfort from Him in this moment? Leha'aviram michukei ritzonecha. They tried to pull this away from us. Our acceptance of God's will, our acceptance of God's mitzvot, whether we understand or we don't understand. And the minute I saw this video, and the minute I thought about this, all of a sudden, clear as day, I finally understood something that I never understood. The Gemara tells us in Shabbat that when God asked the Jewish people to accept the Torah, they said, we will do and we will listen. What does it mean, we will do and we will listen? We will accept it, we'll do, even before we've heard. An act of complete reliance and trust, right? Who signs without reading the contract? Well, technically all of us. But who physically signs without looking at, nobody does that, right? Why would they say, we'll do and we'll listen? Wow, what an unbelievable level of trust. The Gemara tells us that immediately following that action of Naaseh v'Nishma, what does God do? Kafa alehem har kegigit. He held the mountain above them and said, if you accept the Torah, great. If not, sham te'ekvu atchem, there will be your burial place. And the question everybody wants to know is, why did God have to force them by holding a mountain over their head after they had already said that they were going to do it? And not only after they said they were going to do it, but they were going to do it no matter whether or not they understood, no matter whether or not they agreed, no matter whether or not they felt good about doing it. Why do you have to do it? And there's many answers to this question. Tosafot answer, Torah Sheba'al Peh, Torah Shebichtav, many different answers. But according to this, it becomes clear as day. God was saying, I know that you just said that you would do it just because I said so. But you're doing it just because I said so, because the God that you know is a God that took you out of Egypt, a God that gave you manna from the heaven, a God that split the sea for you, a God that's giving you water, a God that's taking care of all of your needs. How will you react When the God that you have to follow in his ways seems to be threatening your life, kafa alehem har gigigit, and he said, by a show of hands, who's still in? Everyone get that? Laha'aviram michukei retzonecha. Both in terms of the mitzvot and our day to day. May God bless us to know him. May God bless us to feel him. Because when Hashem is something that we feel, in the words of Rita Benisti's book that I told everyone to buy for Chanuka, I can't remember the exact quote, but the quote was something like this: God, let your presence be my answer. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen. Rabbi Chananya.